The rise of Adolf Hitler and the Third Reich still haunts us today. One central aspect of Hitler's reign was to create a new generation of National Socialists. This generation of kids was raised on beliefs of racial purity and fanatical loyalty to the Führer. He did this by creating the Hitler Youth, aimed to mold young minds into ardent followers, willing to carry out the party's agenda without question. Welcome to Past Perspectives, and today we will dive into the stomach-churning details of the Hitler Youth formation, the relentless indoctrination and training, the leaders who shaped it, and the diabolic things this education made the kids do. But before we dive in, make sure to subscribe to Past Perspectives to learn about all the history topics you've never learned about in school. In the aftermath of World War I, Germany was a nation in turmoil, grappling with defeat and the harsh conditions of the Treaty of Versailles. Adolf Hitler used this situation to rise to power, and while he was on his rise, he founded the Hitler Youth on March 14, 1922. It started as the youth organization of the Nazi Party with the goal to instill the values and beliefs of National Socialism in young Germans. The intention behind it was to cultivate loyalty to the Nazi Party from a young age, training boys to become members of the party, soldiers, and future leaders of the Nazi regime. By the time Nazis came to power in 1933, the Hitler Youth had grown substantially in influence and membership and eventually became mandatory for all eligible Aryan youth in Germany with the law of Hitler Youth enacted on December 1, 1936. One of the key figures in implementing Hitler's vision and his influence extended to the Hitler Youth was Heinrich Himmler, head of the SS and one of the most powerful men in Nazi Germany. Himmler ensured that the curriculum and training were infused with the Nazi ideology, emphasizing loyalty to the Führer, physical prowess, and adherence to the Aryan racial ideals. He was instrumental in creating a generation of young National Socialists who were taught to value the collective over the individual and were prepared to lay down their lives for the Nazi cause. Himmler's vision for the Hitler Youth was not merely about political alignment. It was about molding the very character and soul of the German youth. He saw them as the future bearers of the Nazi legacy, and through his influence on the organization's structure and content, he aimed to create a youth unswerving in their devotion to National Socialism. Later on, Baldur von Schirach became the Reich youth leader in 1931 and was as instrumental as Himmler in forging the organization's philosophy, focusing on physical fitness, nationalism, and unwavering loyalty to the Nazi regime. Under his guidance, the Hitler Youth grew into a potent arm of the Nazi Party, reaching millions of German youths. On the other hand, we have individuals like Sophie Scholl who symbolized resistance. She was a member of the White Rose resistance group and fought against the brainwashing of the German youth. And yet, despite her efforts, most children during that time went through the Hitler Youth. But what did the Hitler Youth actually look like? After the law of Hitler Youth was enacted, every kid as young as 10 years was inducted into separate divisions for boys and girls. The boys' division was known for its rigorous physical training, military-style drills, and political dedication, all designed to prepare them for eventual military service and leadership within the Reich. On the other side, we have the girls' division, called the League of German Girls, focused on physical fitness and domestic skills to prepare them for motherhood and support roles. But we are going more in-depth on the girls' role in the Hitler Youth and the diabolical things they did later on. Forcing every kid to join the Hitler Youth reached Hitler's goal to encapsulate the Nazi ideology into every aspect of life, molding a generation in its own disturbing image. But let's look at each aspect a bit more in depth: the indoctrination and training. The indoctrination and physical training of the Hitler Youth were methodically planned and executed. Ideological lessons emphasized loyalty to the Führer, racial purity, and nationalism. The youth members were taught to see Adolf Hitler as a godlike figure that saved Germany and that he had brought back the nation from the brink of despair. In the same way, they were indoctrinated to the concept of racial purity. The Hitler Youth was indoctrinated with a belief in Aryan supremacy. They were taught that Germans were the master race, and anyone who did not fit the Aryan ideal was seen as inferior or even subhuman. This belief extended into their daily lives, influencing how they viewed and treated others, especially Jews and other minority groups. In preparation for the war, they were also told that Germany's destiny was to rule Europe and that sacrifices, including their own lives, were a patriotic duty. At the same time, the physical regimen was military-like, designed to instill discipline, toughness, and unwavering obedience. This combination of mental manipulation and physical conditioning aimed to create an army of young National Socialists dedicated to carrying out the horrifying agenda of the Third Reich. To make sure that the Hitler Youth actually worked, Hitler knew he had to carefully craft this powerful instrument to impact every aspect of a kid's life. So he built it on three foundations: structure, education, and control. The organizational structure of the Hitler Youth was both intricate and hierarchical. At the top was the Reich Youth Leadership, headed by key leaders such as Baldur von Schirach. Beneath this were various regional and local divisions, each with specific ranks and roles. This meticulous structuring ensured that the Nazi ideology was uniformly disseminated down to the grassroots level. The next foundation was education, and we already covered most of the educational aspect. Hitler was extremely skilled in glorifying Germany's past and at the same time demonizing its enemies. One big example was music and arts. There have been whole campaigns against degenerate music, especially jazz and anything associated with the Jewish or African American culture. And the last foundation was the control they wanted to have over the lives of children. Attendance to the Hitler Youth was mandatory, and all daily activities were regimented. From what they wore to what they read and listened to, everything was monitored and guided. Family bonds were often strained, as loyalty to the Führer was expected to supersede all else. The Hitler Youth even reached into the private sphere, with members encouraged to report any un-German behavior in their homes. But more on that in just a second. Together, the structure, education, and control within the Hitler Youth worked in tandem to create a generation molded in the image of the Nazi regime. The youth were not just taught, but were conditioned to live and breathe the principles of National Socialism, making them both the products and the propagators of one of history's most terrifying ideologies. But now, let's take a look at the more special situations in the Hitler Youth. We have already talked about the Bund Deutscher Mädel, or the League of German Girls, which was the female counterpart to the Hitler Youth. Now, besides training young women to be homemakers and mothers, they were also taught on physical fitness and the indoctrination in National Socialistic values. But it went further than that. Girls as young as 10 were already taught that their #1 priority is to be the bearers of the Aryan race and that they need to embrace it. The emphasis here was on creating obedient women who could contribute to the Nazi cause by raising strong and ideologically pure children. The obedience towards the Führer went this far that it had a huge impact on family life, and it created huge distrust within families. Young kids were encouraged to report any non-conforming views expressed at home, and parents often felt they had to censor themselves in their own households. If children within the Hitler Youth reported their parents for expressing anti-Nazi sentiments or engaged in activities that were considered disloyal to the regime, the consequences could be severe. Depending on the nature and perceived gravity of the offense, the authorities might conduct an investigation. In some cases, parents might be arrested by the Gestapo, the secret state police, and could face imprisonment or even execution if found guilty of serious anti-Nazi activities. Even expressing doubt or criticism about the regime's policies could lead to a loss of employment, social ostracization, or placement in a concentration camp. After the Second World War broke out, the boys of the Hitler Youth found themselves being increasingly utilized on the front lines. Having been trained from a young age in paramilitary skills, they were deployed in combat roles, particularly as the war reached its desperate final stages. Driven by the intense indoctrination they had received, many fought with a fanaticism that belied their years. The involvement of these children, with some being as young as 14, in such deadly conflicts highlighted the regime's willingness to exploit even its youngest citizens. After the first few successful campaigns in the war, the influence of the Hitler Youth extended beyond the borders of Germany, manifesting itself in affiliated organizations in several European countries occupied by Nazi forces. This expansion was part of the broader agenda to instill the Nazi ideology across the continent, affecting the lives of millions of young people and shaping a generation. However, despite the extensive indoctrination, not all members followed the Nazi ideology blindly. Some of them, like the members of the White Rose, actively fought against the regime. The White Rose Resistance Group was a non-violent intellectual movement led by university students in Munich, including Hans and Sophie Scholl. The White Rose was unique in that it used leaflets, graffiti, and other peaceful means to spread anti-Nazi messages and call for an end to the war. They passionately believed in the power of words and ideas to awaken the conscience of a nation seduced by Hitler's propaganda. These brave young individuals knew the risks they were taking. Dissent in the Third Reich was met with brutal suppression. Their activities were indeed discovered, leading to the arrest, trial, and execution of several of its members, including the Scholl siblings. The White Rose turned out to be right, and after the fall of the Nazi regime, dismantling the deeply entrenched Hitler Youth became a complex and daunting task. Allied forces and the subsequent German government undertook legal actions against key figures, some of whom were tried and convicted for war crimes. These legal measures aimed to send a strong message about the responsibility and culpability of those who had led the indoctrination of youth. However, the process of healing a nation's scars went beyond legalities, and many former members of the Hitler Youth had to confront their past and learn to reintegrate into a society that was struggling to redefine its identity. Educational reforms, public discourse, and a commitment to democratic values became essential tools in this reconstruction process. The difficult journey towards reconciliation and understanding still resonates in contemporary discussions about education, nationalism, and the role of youth in society, reflecting the long-lasting impact of the Hitler Youth on German history and culture. As we end this video, please let me know what you think we can learn from the history of the Hitler Youth and what we can do to ensure that kids are learning the right morals. With that being said, thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to Past Perspectives to never miss another video about the untold history.